And good afternoon. How's everyone doing? Dr. Roddenberry coming to you live from Willow Springs, North Carolina. I see we've got Nelisa on the broadcast, as always, sharing her positivity. Thanks very much, Nelisa, for your kind comments. Who else have we got online today? Up and we have Jenna Bauer. Of course, we have Jenna Bauer. How are you doing? Sandy texted me after last week's broadcast and said he apologized for not being able, they apologized for not being able to make it, but Sandeep will presumably be here this time. I'm doing well, thanks. I'm doing well. I'm glad that it is now long sleeve weather. I don't know about you, but I am tired of 95-degree days. So it'll be nice to have a jacket on occasionally, or at least some sleeves, right? So the fall is looking forward to me. Do we have any pumpkin spice fans here? Anybody like pumpkin spice? I like pumpkins, not so much for pumpkin spice. Well, that's good. And you know what? I like it because it always means college football, and I like college football. Baking pumpkin. There you go, baking pumpkin smoothies. Listen to her. Elisa's going on. She sounds to me like she should have a job as a celebrity chef. I don't know, right? Cool. All right. Well, good. I'll bet you cooking probably makes you feel good, Nelisa. It probably relaxes you, makes you forget your problems and your other things. Watching college football on Saturday afternoons, especially with my old man, we get over at the house and maybe have a beer, and I kind of relax, and it just, I release the energy and the tension that I felt all week. I do the same thing. I don't have my guitar with me. It's downstairs, but I have my guitar with me. And sometimes I'll just strum and practice scales, and it just relaxes my mind. And it helps me to deal and manage with my stress in a positive way. Now, Nelisa, Jenna, you were here in the webinar last night, so you kind of got a preview of what we're going to talk about at the end of class today when it comes to dealing with stress. Because the webinar typically comes after the class. That's okay, don't worry about it. Spoiler alert, you already know where we're going with this. But for the rest of you, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to live your best life. And what we're going to be talking about today is what stress is and how we can maybe develop the habit to avoid feeling the negative effects of stress. Now, if you'll remember from last week, we were talking about positive psychologists and health psychologists are the two subdisciplines. Health psychology and positive psychology are the two disciplines whose interest is in promoting the well-being of human beings, right? Remember, well-being isn't just living a long time, but it's also being happy, having a sense of meaning, having a sense of engagement. It's a lot more than just being healthy. It involves these psychological concepts. And we've got health psychologists who promote these behaviors and positive psychologists who do research in this area. And so today we're talking about one major way in which you can affect your life's well-being and also your longevity, if that matters to you. And it's by learning how to deal with stress. How many of you feel like you're overwhelmed by stress? Do any of you feel okay with stress? What kind of things bother you? Is it some sort of big event, something bad that's happening or happened, or is it one of those daily things that just annoys you each and every day? Do you have a job that you hate, that you're sort of burnt out at? Or did something really bad happen that you're having trouble dealing with? After stuck with family or a big calculus test. Okay, right. Those can be events. You feel burned out a lot too. Right. And the weird thing is we get these stressors from all different directions. Now, If you ask me to explain stress, I'm going to start by saying it's sort of weird because the term stress is used to act on the force that's coming at you, and stress is also used to describe the experience that you have. So sometimes we say stress, we get a little bit sloppy with it. Today, I'm going to say when I talk about stress, it's going to be the response that you feel and that your body produces. And when we talk about any things in terms of this is what stresses me out, we're going to use the term stressor. All right. And a stressor can be something like a calculus test, or it can be as simple as a calculus test or stubbing your toe, or it can be as complex as losing your car, your job, or your home. These are what we call stressors, and the experience they produce on you is called stress. And here's the deal. The weird thing is when we think about stress, we typically think about all these big emotional things that happen to us. But if you were walking down the hall and somebody stepped in front of you and you had to walk around them, they are a stressor, and your body would have registered that change in plans ever so slightly. Your body would have registered that event. All right. Now, you can think of stresses occur in lots of ways. In your book, they're going to talk about major life stressors. There's people who've done research that show, you see these major life stressors over here. These are sort of like the big things that happen to us. Research has shown that if you have over 250 points this is not the entire list, it's all I could fit here on this little picture. But if you have more than 250 points, you are at an increased risk for a stress-related illness this year. And so we talk about life changes. And the weird thing is, good things can be stressful just like bad things. I don't know if any of you have ever been married or had a baby, but those are very awesome events that are also very, very stressful. Preparing yourself for a football game or a sporting event or some sort of competition that you really are excited about is going to create that stress response in the body. But we typically call that eustress as opposed to distress. And if you'll remember the talk from Kelly McDonald, How to Make Stress Your Friend, in a sense, what she's trying to suggest is that you ought to think of these stressors more as positive events rather than negative events. You should sort of encourage yourself to jump into these stressors. But big life changes can be stressors. And then daily hassles. I don't know if any of you have. One of the things that really annoys me here at Wake Tech is they don't have the single sign-on. Every time I go to a different Wake Tech web system, I have to use my login information. And they make you have that really long password. That annoys me every day. That is such a negative hassle. There you go, Jenner. That is a huge life event right there. Applying for the green card, I guarantee you that was an absolute hassle. What country did he immigrate from? That's pretty interesting. I'd be curious to find out what the process is, and I'll bet it's a ton of paperwork and meetings and hassle, right? But these are all of these different kinds of stress. And I really love the quote here from the bomb diffusing guy person. So I once asked an EOD guy once about the stress of bomb diffusing, and he said there's absolutely no stress. I'm either wrong or it's not my problem anymore. That's kind of an interesting way to think about your job. Cool, we have a fellow, a Hungarian in our midst. Fantastic, Janet. Congratulations on getting married, by the way. Right, I'll bet. Now, anytime a stressor gets in your way, from somebody stepping in front of you in the hallway, to me telling you you have an exam or a writing assignment coming up, from you losing your house, anytime one of these things happen, it causes an emotional response in you. And you can think of stress as an emotional response, okay? Stress is an emotional response. And so if you remember last week, or a couple weeks ago, we talked about emotions. And I said that we have an amygdala, which is our negative emotional center, our rage and fear center, and we have a frontal lobe. And they work together. And babies and adults learn how to moderate the functioning of the amygdala with the more advanced frontal lobe. But in a sense, that was how we described an emotion. Let's think of stress in the same terms. It's an emotional response. It's got a cognitive component and it's got a physiological component. First, I'd like to start by describing the physiological component. Your body is designed in an amazingly wonderful way such that your body can allocate resources differently based upon what's happening to you. All right. So if you are sitting around a campfire and you are totally happy and safe, your body directs more energy to your stomach so you can digest things. Okay. When you're in a fight, your body sends more energy to your lungs and your heart so that you can fight, and not so much energy to your stomach at that time. Your body can sort of marshal the different resources you have around your body to prepare you for situations that are scary, so situations that are threatening. The part of the nervous system that does this is called the autonomic nervous system. These are a collection of nerves that run from your brain to your internal organs. And if you get online and Google autonomic nervous system, there's a zillion pictures showing you all the different organs that are innervated. Your stomach, your lungs, your heart, your eyeballs, your sweat glands, different your adrenal glands, so all of these different organs inside your body are connected to the autonomic nervous system. All right, and what happens is when something activates your fear response, your amygdala kicks in this sympathetic nervous response. And I'm not sure where okay, there you go, right here. So when something scares you, it kicks off your what we call your HPA axis, your hypothalamic pituitary axis. Your amygdala activates your amygdala activates your little hypothalamus, which is right beside it. Okay, and that causes your pituitary gland to start releasing this hormone, which activates the rest of your body. All right, don't have to worry about the details of this unless you want to take a physiology of stress class. But basically, you've got your amygdala, your hypothalamus, and your pituitary gland. And what happens is your amygdala activates your hypothalamus, which activates your pituitary, which dumps this adrenocorticotropin hormone into your blood system, which causes your body to begin releasing cortisol, adrenaline, and cortisol and adrenaline. And the cortisol actually raises the part of your kidney that produces, or your pancreas, to cause it to produce more sugar. So what happens is when you are afraid, your body gets a dose of this stress hormone, of this immune hormone, and of insulin, which is an energy hormone. And so these molecules course through your body and prepare you. If you think about it, extra adrenaline, extra energy, right? All of this and immune protection all sets you up to fight, if you will. All right. Now, here's the deal. The sympathetic nervous response increased blood flow to the muscles. It lets you fight. It increases your blood pressure, your heart rate, your blood sugars. Your fat reserves go up. Production goes up. So you have more energy to use. And after a while, your immune response speeds up the blood clotting and starts to fight off any infections you might have gotten as a result of being damaged. This is what's known as a sympathetic nervous response. Now, when I talk about this, what I want you to know is that every time something activates your amygdala, it causes a small sympathetic nervous response. I'm not talking about you going into abject terror every freaking time somebody says hello to you. But every time somebody surprises you, you hear something disappointing, something makes you moderately frustrated, anything you hear or that scares you, anything you think about negatively can activate this system, this sympathetic nervous response system. Now, here's the deal. This sympathetic nervous response system is really good in the short term, gives you energy to fight with, and it actually protects you if you get injured. But here's the problem. This system was designed to work for acute stressors, that is, stressors of short duration. So I'm walking around the forest and I get attacked by a bear. I have that acute fear response. My body's physiology changes. I fight the bear off. The bear goes away. Then I go back to normal. Okay? And that's how this system is designed to work. The unfortunate problem is people with these real developed frontal lobes that can think about all the things we should be doing or need to be doing or haven't been doing, right? And all of these modern day existential pressures that come on our life, right? Nalisa, you hate your job. You got a calc test coming up. You know what? You just burnt that pumpkin spice thing that you were doing. Maybe your romantic partner's decided that they're angry at you. You've got all these things coming in on you and they just stay there. And so what happens is we live in a state of chronic sympathetic nervous, a chronic sympathetic nervous response. Does that make sense? Yes? Give me a little feedback to let me know if that makes any sense. All right, so we live in this constant state of arousal. Now, all right, cool. All right, right. That's what we have to learn how to deactivate the amygdala by using our frontal lobe. Once your body has that physiological response, it can be difficult. You have to use the mind. Okay, so this guy named Hans Selye identified this thing he called the general adaptation syndrome, which he says explains the link between stress and illness. Now, this is what happens when your body is undergoes a sympathetic nervous response. If you look at this chart under here, along the x-axis, we have time, and the red line represents your immune response. Okay, and if you see the dashed line that goes across the middle represents your normal resistance level. Now, here's the crazy thing. When your sympathetic nervous system is first activated, actually your immunity drops a little bit. And this protects you, weirdly enough, from having an immune response and swelling up during the fight, right? Because you don't want your arm to swell up, you want to be able to swing it. If you've ever gotten a fight before and had somebody punch you in the face, unfortunately I have as a kid, have you ever noticed that at the minute you get in the fight and you get punched in the face, you don't see anything, but a half an hour later your eyeball puffs way, way up. It doesn't happen immediately. The weird thing is, when you are frightened or you have this sympathetic nervous response, your immunity actually drops for about a half an hour, a short period of time, to give you time to do what it needs doing before it starts swelling up with antibodies to protect you. All right. Now, if you'll follow that red line, yes, 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 you've got this adrenaline kicks in. Yes. Now, here's the deal. About a half an hour, what happens is your body's immune response kicks into hyperdrive. And this is designed to protect you. Let's say you were cut or scratched in that fight with a dirty claw or a dirty tooth, and you have some microbes in you. Your body is designed to protect you against infection. And that's exactly what happens to your body's immune system after it meets a stressor. Now, here's the deal. Most people live in a constant state of arousal. And so what happens is this immune response just stays high, and it stays high, and it stays high, and it stays high. And if you've ever played a sports game on the computers, what you'll notice is that you have that super jump option on your basketball player, but it only works for about 20 seconds and then you sort of lose that power. Same thing happens with the immune response. If you keep activating it over a long enough time, it tires out. It goes into what we call the exhaustion stage. And then you are actually less immune to the normal things. So the way stress and immunity works is the stress, it activates your immune response so long that it tires it out. And then the normal things that shouldn't get you sick begin to start getting you sick. Now, keep in mind, this also, stress has been linked to diabetes, stress has been linked to heart attacks, right? Now, one of the things that happens when you're in a stress response, when you're in this sympathetic nervous response, is your heart beats faster and your blood vessels constrict to increase your blood pressure, right? Now, this is okay in the short term, helps you fight, but it doesn't help you in the long term, right? Plus, while your body is in this stress response, you are producing more fats. And if any of you have ever heard about cholesterol and heart attacks, you do not want lots of cholesterol floating through arteries that have been constricted. That increases the likelihood of a heart attack, right? Now, chronic levels of glucose, of elevated levels of glucose in your blood, also not good at all either, right? That messes with your glucose system. Now, all of these things are going to lead to negative physical outcomes. And a lot of people manage anxiety or the anxiety of stress with problem behaviors. Some people eat emotionally, some people drink emotionally, some people smoke, vape, and do other compulsive behaviors. So the weird thing is stress, and when people used to tell me stress kills, I always thought that was crap that psychologists said until I started learning about health psychology. And I realized that there is a definable physiological path link that you can explain that suggests that stress has these negative outcomes, right? Now, there are a bunch of studies that show how psychological factors such as stress affect immune functioning. And so what they did was they brought people into the laboratory and they dosed them up with the cold virus. Everybody got the cold virus sprayed up their nose. Now, they asked these people to talk about their levels of stress and loneliness, and they divided the group into those people who were stressed out and lonely and those people who weren't. And what they found was that after being exposed to the cold virus, the people who were stressed out and lonely tended to be more likely to to develop cold symptoms than those who didn't. We're all being exposed to the same virus. It's just these people have higher levels of stress. And lo and behold, we see more sickness in them. All right? Now, okay, yeah, quickly. One of the things that you're going to notice is that there are some people in the world who tend not to deal with stress very well, and they tend to get angry and impatient about things. I don't know if you've ever heard of this thing called the Type A personality style. All right, it was discovered by a cardiologist, not a psychologist. And what he noticed was he had been doing surgery for a long time, and he noticed that there tended to be a pattern in those patients that had multiple heart problems. So everybody who comes into his office has a heart problem, and they do a surgery or whatever intervention they do. And then the question is, does that person have a second problem later? And what he found was there appeared to be a curious pattern between the patients who had recurrent heart problems. He noticed that these people tended to come to the appointments early. They tended to be incredibly impatient. People tended to be really driven in their profession, and these people tended to have bad tempers. And this doctor, Rosenman, back in the 1960s, began to believe that there was a personality type. He called it the type A personality that was associated with heart disease. Now, this was way before we had all of this other stuff drawn out with the physiology of the nervous response. But look at how this sort of maps on to people who experience stress. Are you an impatient person? Are you extremely achievement oriented? Do you have a bad temper? And he developed this test and had this cluster of traits he called the type A personality. Now, here's the deal. If you, going back, research, I don't know about you, but I'm a fairly impatient person, and I am definitely very, very competitive, but I don't feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. Now, further research over the last, I don't know, we'll see, I guess that would be almost 60 years, has shown that really, if we look at the type A personality, there's really one characteristic which maps on to increased likelihood of cardiovascular problem. It's not so much being impatient, it's not so much being driven, it's those people who react really hostilely and aggressively. If you are one of those people that has what people call an explosive temper, if you scream and throw things, if you really bulge in the neck, actually, that's what I'm saying. You can go take the type A, type B personality test online. What I'm suggesting is it's not the whole type A personality. It actually turns out to really only be hostile. So, when I first saw this, I said, man, I'm impatient and competitive, and I do kind of have a bad temper. It's not a hostile temper. But it turns out it's just that third aspect of the type A that really seems to drive the heart problems. Great question. Great question. Oh, excuse me. Right? And if you think about it, what we're talking about is people who are enraged. Their amygdala, they can't control that amygdala, David. We're going to talk about how we stop this. Their amygdala is firing off, and they don't have any frontal lobe control. They don't have any higher order control over that emotion. And you can learn that, but it's a habit. You know how it is with habits. It's hard to unlearn bad habits. It's better to learn good habits. However, those people who have that rage, they're flying into that, they're experiencing that distress. Now, here's the deal. When you're having fun running around at a football game, when you're in love, when you're doing fun, crazy things, your body's going to experience, if you will, what we'll call sort of a sympathetic nervous response. But the biochemistry of this positive state is going to be a little bit different than the negativity of the stressed state. Okay. Now, and there's also a ton of research talking indirectly about stress by talking about the relationship between depression and physical outcomes. And people who are depressed tend to ruminate about things. Rumination is thinking about things. You ever sit in a corner and think about how that person pissed you off yesterday, or how you're going to do this tomorrow, or why did that person do this to me? Rumination is when we sit and think about things. And it turns out that rumination is localized to a different part of the brain, and rumination tends to be negative, and it tends to cause this negative physiological response. When I was young, I used to have a bad temper and used to get violent. When I grew up, I've grown to have a long temper and don't get violent anymore. Because it means, yes, yeah, well, you matured, definitely, and you changed for the better, David. I would say a lot of people, though, that act out don't get better. So the fact that you have is, I would say, a testament to your great character and hard work. I'm not as angry as I used to be as well. I never got violent, but I did have a worse temper when I was a young kid. I think we mellow a little bit. Not to be too personal, Dave, but how old are you? You know, some of us guys tend to mellow as we move into our 40s and 50s. Some of us don't, but some of us do. And you know, I do know a lot of, yeah, I would say some of my more hot-headed friends have cooled down. Oh, you turned 20? Oh, wow. No. Then you've probably matured. I guarantee you've matured, and you know something probably about your social situation has changed. You may have met someone. I'm not talking about romantically, or you may have found something that gives you purpose. A lot of times there are these sort of, at least I think for guys, sort of our angry teenage years are because we haven't really found a place yet, and so boys act out in this way. So maybe you are maturing, my friend. Okay? Now, here's the deal. Here's where we get into this idea of emotional control. Most events, except for a bear attacking you, or a burning house, or falling 50 feet, whatever, okay, most of the things that terrify us, that bother us, that stress us, are things that require us to think deeply. You know what I mean? I have to think about why my boss pissed me off, or why I don't like this rule or that rule. So a lot of times, there's this connection between our frontal lobe, where we think and process information, in our memory, where we think and ruminate, and our amygdala. And we teach children to use their frontal lobe to control their emotions. That's what training your child's personality in the 1 to 4 year old age. You teach them how to deal with frustration by putting positive cognitions in their thought, so that when they start to get angry, they realize this isn't the end of the world. I'm going to get a cookie tomorrow. We're going to come back tomorrow. And you build this control mechanism into your kid. And so your brain, if you develop emotional control as an adult, your frontal lobe, in a sense, can control, it helps your amygdala reevaluate. Your amygdala makes a quick decision. Does that piss me off? And most things are either going to make you happy or make you mad without you thinking. But then what happens is there's this feedback loop from your frontal lobe, where you reappraise information and you reevaluate its true value. There's actually a little spot in your frontal lobe, right, that does that. And it helps you reevaluate. But this is an ability and a connection you have to practice and develop. And if you do, what it allows the child to do is to control their emotion. Because in a sense, and I'm being very crude and ridiculous when I say this, but in a sense, it's kind of like your frontal lobe clicking off your amygdala, stopping it from having this negative cascade of physiological response. Your frontal mind, your brain does that. Now, here's the bad thing. You can think yourself into an angry situation. How many of you have ever started thinking about something and realized that after 10 minutes of rumination, you had suddenly become enraged about somebody that you weren't mad at 10 minutes ago? So I thought about my brother, Robbie. Yeah, Robbie was here last week. And I started thinking about him. I'm like, you know what? Robbie didn't do this, and then Robbie didn't do that. You can actually, so it works the opposite way too. Your frontal lobe can fire your amygdala up. You've got this feedback loop, right? Exactly, right. And so the deal is, what we want to do is to learn how to use this frontal lobe, the way of thinking about things, to stop this. Now, in sort of a cognitive way, without talking about these brain areas, this guy named Lazarus introduced a conceptual idea of thinking about stress. Exactly, right. It makes you completely normal. The degree to how often does that happen, and do you have trouble controlling it? But it shows the point that these two things sort of work together. What he says is that people don't feel the negative effect or the terror of stress until they've made two appraisals. The first appraisal is whether or not the object in their environment is relevant to them and provides them a stress, right? Is there a challenge in the environment? So if you think about it, Nelisa, if you start telling me about your calculus exam, I'm sitting here. Am I going to be stressed out about that? No, because my primary appraisal is your exam has nothing to do with me. It's completely irrelevant. Now, most people rock around their life figuring out which things are threatening and which things aren't threatening, right? So which things are a challenge and which things aren't a challenge. Now, and we all do a pretty good job of figuring out which things we need to deal with. Now, here's the problem. Here's where we can learn how to help ourselves. And this is at the area of the secondary appraisal. We have to make the decision that this threat, this challenge, is not overwhelming. And too often, people develop a habitual response of saying, I'm overwhelmed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm overwhelmed. But if you actually sit down and think about a lot of the things that challenge you, in a sense, what you might find is that you have the resources to deal with the challenge. Okay, so one of the things that I notice is that when I have a final exam, I don't do the seated final exam, but when I did the seated final exam, some students would come up before the exam the last couple of weeks, and they were excited about the exam. They were ready, they were prepared, they were trying to study for it. They actually, whether or not they knew the material, there were some students that believed they could actually pass the test. And then on the other hand, I guarantee you I had, and these tended to be my more depressed or anxious students. These tended to be the students that were more likely not to finish my class. But as the exam came up, if you talk to them, they would tell you that they felt hopeless about the exam. And so what I would suggest to you is these two students and the students that believed they could do it, they would try. And lo and behold, folks, if you try, you actually get a little bit better. And the students that felt it was hopeless and were overwhelmed by the stress inevitably put off or ignored studying for my exam. And guess what? They failed just like they thought they were going to fail. And so what I want to suggest to you is a lot of people let the world stress them out by believing that they don't have the the resources to deal with the challenge. Now, I'm going to refer you back to, I don't know what page it was, Kelly McGonigal's talk. We just talked about Kelly McGonigal's talk. I don't know what slide I had that on. But the point she's saying is she's talking about how we make secondary appraisals. When we think that things are dangerous, that stress is bad for us, then this stress, we are saying, remember she says, think of stress as something good rather than something bad. She actually had data showing that the thought that stress was bad was actually more dangerous than the stress itself, right? What she's talking about is ways of making secondary appraisals, okay? Some people have a stressful situation and they say, I hate being stressed. Stress is bad and I should avoid it. And other people say, uh-oh, this stress is energizing, and they feed into that energy, right? Now, I know this sounds super stupid, David, and you're wanting to say, yeah, well, that's really easy for you to say, but how do I specifically deal with these things? In order to do that, David, what I would have to do is sit down personally with one of you in a clinical session, and we'd have to find out what your stressors are, okay? And then what we would have to learn how to do is how to reappraise those stressors. Reappraise those stressors. Most people, when they meet a stressor, they immediately go to the worst case feeling. That's just the natural response. people engage in all or nothing thinking, or they say something like, that's the worst thing that could ever happen, or if I don't get everything I want, it's going to be the worst that happened. And so, yes, and that's exactly what cognitive behavioral therapy is. And I'm going to talk about cognitive behavioral therapy next week. Really, thinking is a habit. And the unfortunate problem is that thinking affects your amygdala. So if you have negative thoughts going on in your head, it activates your amygdala, you get the stress response, you have the negative effects. If, on the other hand, you can train yourself to have positive thought habits, then your amygdala doesn't get kicked on and you don't experience these negative habits. And one of the things I like about Nalisa every day is when she comes into the class, I don't know if you folks noticed it, she says, hello, hope everyone is having an awesome day. So happy to be here. Now, whether or not she really felt that, I don't know. But Nalisa came in and just threw out a bunch of positive energy. And the weird thing is, those thoughts are habits, and those habits have consequences. We not just think about, no, when something negative happens to you, just remember, no, you can't deny things, but what you have to do is to learn how to reevaluate them and realize that it's not that bad. Most people automatically skip to it's that bad. Most people, and look up rational emotive behavioral therapy, Albert Ellis. Most people respond emotionally to negative events and they just immediately go to the worst possible cognition possible. And that cognition, that thought, has implications. So, yes, your car broke down. That sucks. This is true. But were you injured? No. Will you be able to fix your car? Yes. Will life go on? Yes. But what I find is a lot of people, when the car breaks down, instead of having all of these positive cognitions, they say, oh my God, my car broke down. Why does it always happen to me? My life sucks. I'm never going to figure this out. Do you see what I'm saying? The bad shit's going to happen. You just have to learn how to realize that your first emotional response, that, and most people do that. So the cognitive behavioral therapist, David, would bring you into the lab. I'd find out what kinds of things trigger you. And then what we would do is, after getting to know you a little bit, I would then lead you through these triggering events. And we would say, okay, David, close your eyes. Imagine that X happened. And you would say, okay. And I would say, okay, David, what's your normal, what do you feel happening? And you would be saying to me, well, I feel like I'm going to get angry imagining this situation. Okay, David, what would be a better response? And I lead you to that positive response. Now, the thing is, we practice this in my clinic where the stakes aren't so high. Because if you haven't practiced this and it really happens in the real world, it's hard to stop yourself from the natural over emotional response. You know what I mean? So, what I would do, David, is we would find out your triggers and then we would practice responding positively in clinical session. And then you would go out and try to be aware and practice that. And we keep track of your progress. That's the basis behind cognitive behavioral therapy. Yes, you can upgrade your car parts. Yes, you can. And you know what? You might even learn something if you do a car repair. All right, the final thing I want to say, last couple minutes, we're going to end up a couple minutes early with a purple. There you go. I like the way you're thinking. Sounds like a Prince card to me, at least I like it. Right. Now, along with thinking positive thoughts, good relationships and having a group of people to talk to are going to act as a buffer. And in fact, Kelly McGonigal in the webinar specifically talked about that. Using other people, sharing your stresses, and getting support from other people is an amazing buffer that helps you protect yourself from the negative effects of stress. All right. Now, and if you have, and you know, people talk about their prototypical marriage partner, whatever, but you know what? You just need a gang. You need some people to look after you, to give you support with daily living tasks. You know what I mean? Everybody needs a helping hand. When that car breaks down, you need to be able to call somebody. And also, it really, really helps us to know that somebody else cares. So, really good relationships are fundamental to protecting yourself from stress. You can do a lot of things wrong, but as long as you got some friends, you'll be okay. I hope you do, and I hope it makes things better for you, Annalisa. Now, one of the things you're going to find is that adult men tend not to have as big a social circle as do adult women. Okay, so most men who are married for 20, 30, 40 years don't have that many close friends. And when we do have friends, we play golf with them or watch football. We don't talk about things and we don't deal with our emotional problems. We don't have anybody to lay or to cry on. You know what I mean? Most guys, when they do that stuff, they share their emotions with their partner, with their romantic partner. Now, what you're going to find is that in when people get older, when the male dies in old age, a lot of times the widowed wife will live on 20 years after the husband has died. But what you will find is a curious phenomenon in late adulthood when a couple had been married for a long time and the woman dies. I think the average lifespan after that's about 1 year. So most married men, if they've been married for a long, long time, and nobody knows exactly why, but one potential reason might be this lack of social support. You know, you're 75, 80, you don't have anybody to go to and talk about your grief or any of the things that you are feeling. So good relationships are very important. Now, the weird thing is the data suggests that having a piece of paper matters. Doesn't matter to me. It matters to the insurance company, so you might as well go get the piece of paper because it's going to help you get better insurance. Actually, that may be the reason for this particular finding. What here is, but you're going to see that health people who are married tend to be healthier than people who are living with a partner, and certainly more than people who have never been married or are separated. Most guys like experiences share with each other, going biking or doing stuff. Yeah, yeah, and in fact, it's at least in my experience, it's very rare the guy that you can talk to and start pouring your heart out about, if you're having a problem and you start telling your buddy about it, most of the time they will get incredibly embarrassed and shut the conversation off. Um, uh, and that's the way guys are. Now, maybe that's just my generation, could be. Yeah, and sharing problems and getting that support. You need to want and go get that support for it to help you. Now, the other thing is, I'm not particularly religious, but the research suggests that having a sense of spirituality also leads to a greater sense of well being. And it doesn't matter which religion. I don't care if you're Islamic, Christian, if you're Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Scientology, whatever it is, or actually, I take that one back. Christian Science, as long as you have a group of people and a sense of meaning around you, this tends to provide people with a sense of well-being. You get the social support of the people around you. Remember, I told you social support over here is really important. Typically, church promotes healthy behaviors. Most churches don't want you smoking or drinking or taking drugs. Not a bad idea. And a lot of times people find a sense of meaning from these spiritual matters, and all of these act as buffers against stress and increase well-being. Yes, it does. And you know what? You've got to have a reason to believe. You've got to have a way of making sense of the world. You've got to have some sort of connection in the world, and that connection with a higher being, with Christ or Brahma or whatever you feel. Yeah, absolutely. Very important. I like that. Okay. You know what? That is all I have to say for today. We're going to finish up a couple of minutes early. I want to thank you for coming today. I had some great questions, as always. Nelisa, Jenna, and David, you folks were a wonderful audience today. Uh, Take care. It was great to see you. And next week, we're going to be finishing up the final 2 lectures in this class. We're going to be talking about the sociopath next door. Take care. Have a great day. And I will see you next time. Bye.